So, if you've spent any amount of time on the internet, you've probably come across countless ads of people trying to sell you on the idea of how to start an agency. And there's all kinds of different agencies that you can create. There's social media agencies, there's e commerce agencies. There's basically countless agency models that people are trying to supposedly teach you how to create so that you can get to a point where you're making tens of thousands of dollars per month and you're actually not actually doing any of the work because you're the agency owner and you're subcontracting all this work out. So, in today's podcast, I wanted to just talk about this whole like agency model thing that I see on the internet a lot and compare and contrast that to being a freelancer, being a successful freelancer, and maybe we can talk about the pros and cons of both approaches. So, Jessica, what do you think about the whole agency model?
So I've been on both sides of this equation. I've been the freelancer. I've also created my own agency. Funny enough, I've reverted back to being a freelancer, and I've been on the client side interfacing with external agencies. So I have quite a bit of experience when it comes to obviously freelancing and then agencies. So, what is an agency? An agency is basically a team that you outsource work to. So, this can take many shapes, many forms, but that's pretty much it. Bare bones, you have a team of people that can offload some of that work, some of that responsibility for working with different clients. And I understand where it starts. It usually starts with a freelancer and you're burnt out and you're really tired of spending all your time on client projects. And you're like, wow, this would be really nice to actually get some help and to outsource some of this work to a team. And then that's when you would bring in a team to help you with that. Like you mentioned, there's a lot of content out there about how you should create an agency and scale your agency. And I don't think it's a one size fits all. It's really where you have to take a step back and figure out, like, what do I want for my career? Do I get a lot of satisfaction working directly with clients and sending over deliverables? Or do I want to scale a team? Do I want to outsource this work, kind of be more of a people manager and create systems? So it just depends on what you want. And I remember when I was going through that transition from freelancer to agency, I remember you were like, why? Like, why are you creating this agency? And I think at the time I was like, oh, yeah, we can go for scale. I can free up more of my time. But I remember you were never tempted to go that route.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could call myself slightly jaded when it comes to the agency model. I think a lot of people are attracted to it because it's a sexy thing. You know, it's sexier than being a freelancer because you're the boss. You're the one telling other people what to do. You're bringing in the work and then you're outsourcing it to people that are making a lot less money than you are, and you're just skimming off the top. It's a sexy business model, but I think for me personally, I've always kind of been skeptical of the model only because, as a successful freelancer and someone who's been freelancing for 10 years now, there's always that tension between the freelancer and the agency. And I feel like freelancers are actually, for the first time in a long time in 2025, I think freelancers are starting to get the upper hand when it comes to competing with certain low-level agencies. Now, there's always going to be the big boy agency. There's always going to be, the Wyden and Kennedys of the world, huge advertising agencies that have a ton of top talent. But I think when it comes to smaller budget projects, especially compared to, huge corporate level projects, but when it comes to these smaller level projects, I feel like in today's day and age, the modern client is more aware of and more informed of that business model than ever before. And I think what's happening is as clients become more aware of what I call the outsourcing epidemic, which is where people have hidden agencies where they are just the figurehead, where their profile brings in work and then they subcontract that work out, but they're not actually telling the client that this work is being subcontracted. And I think if you've ever been on that client side of the equation where you're hiring someone to do work and they tell you that they're doing the work, and then you realize over time by looking at the work that they give you versus the work that you asked for, you can realize pretty quickly that, oh, wait, I'm being taken advantage of. This person isn't actually executing the work. They're subcontracting it with someone else. And that's why there's a disconnect between what I'm asking them to do and the level of the quality of the work that I'm getting in return. And there's some sort of disconnect. And usually that disconnect is because they're subcontracting the work to someone even cheaper than what they're charging you. So for me personally, I get really frustrated with this business model because a lot of people that are attracted to it and a lot of these educators online, these gurus online, they're promoting the idea of an agency, and you're just getting a lot of people that are trying to get rich quick. They're providing them with a business model and a type of business transaction that, in my opinion, it trends a little too far to the dishonesty. And I think in today's day and age, honesty and trust are going to be the core of your business. And that's why I'm more attracted to being the freelancer, being the person that basically handles most of the work, handles what the client is asking you to do. You're interfacing with the client and you're executing the work itself.
I think you're right. The cat's out of the bag. Like, I think agencies are on the out and out. I don't think that they're as popular as they once were. I do think clients are figuring this out. And I think that's one thing to be sort of dishonest, where like you say you're doing the work, but you're really outsourcing it to a team. That's one thing. But also from like a profitability perspective, it's hard to make the numbers work. And of course, it sounds really sexy, like, oh my gosh, amazing. I have this much money coming in. I'm going to outsource it to whatever my team. And then what are you left over with? Plus, you have the stress. You have the stress of like, this is my brand. This is my company. The buck stops with me. So I have to deal with fires. And there's just a whole plethora of admin and overhead and operations that turned me off almost immediately. I was like, this is not what I signed up for. I signed up to work with amazing clients, to have that amazing relationship. And I kept getting farther and farther away from that. And that's one of the reasons I decided, nope, no more. I'm going to go back to the freelancer model because it's just way more simple. I can do amazing work. I can have those fulfilling relationships, and I can raise my prices so that at the end of the day, the profit that I keep is going to be the same, if not higher, than what it would be working with a team and outsourcing all of it.
Yeah, and obviously, our perspective on this whole agency versus freelancer thing is very biased because we've been freelancing. I've never started an agency. I've worked for agencies, and I know people can create agencies that are, transparent, and clients are aware that they're working with an agency. They're working with someone who has a team. They're working with someone who is going to be subcontracting the work out. And a lot of clients are attracted to the idea of, I have one point of contact. I have one point of contact. I'm going to work with this marketing agency, and I only have to talk to John. And John is going to basically interface with me, and he's going to tell me that he can handle emails, advertisements, blank, everything that comes with their marketing. And so a lot of clients are attracted to the idea of one point of contact, and then that point of contact is actually going to subcontract that work out. But I think in today's economy, the level of execution that you have to hit, because the level of competition over time has only gone up, right? Every single year, there's more competition, more people trying to be freelancers, more people trying to win work, more people running ads. So people's attentions are split a million different directions. So, as the years go on, the competition gets better and better and better. People's offers get better and better. And I think it's going to become harder and harder for the agencies to outcompete the specialized freelancers. And I say that because there's always going to be a disconnect between what the client is asking. If it's like a game of telephone, the client asks the point of contact to execute X, Y, and Z, right? Okay, now the point of contact needs to relay that information to their subcontractors. And that is where communication can start to break down. And if you've ever hired an agency or a hidden agency, which is someone who doesn't tell you that they're an agency, but they're subcontracting, that's where a lot of the issues rise up, because there's this game of telephone between your point of contact and then all the people that they're subcontracting to. Maybe they're subcontracting people that don't even speak the language that you speak. Maybe they're trying to do triage and they're trying to hire people in other countries that are way cheaper than the labor in your country. Sounds good on paper until you're trying to convey a really difficult problem to them, and then the communication breaks down and your deliverables are not what you were asking for. So I think communication is the core of the issue, and freelancers can really offer extremely precise communication with the client. And that's where their advantage comes from, because not only are they communicating directly with the client, but they're the ones executing the work that the client is asking for. And so the freelancer can really make sure that they ask the right questions, that they have a really solid understanding of what the client is asking for before they go and execute the work themselves. And the freelancer can even ask questions and provide updates directly to the client while the work is being executed. Versus a lot of these agencies, they're hiring people in different time zones. They're hiring people who don't speak your language very well. And so you're not able to provide a super real time level of update that the freelancer can. And so there's just so many pitfalls that you have to be aware of if you do want to start an agency, that you need to be aware of those, because again, you're competing with freelancers more and more over time. And that's just kind of how I see things developing.
And I think for the right company, it makes sense to hire out that expertise to an agency. I recently saw the Gap jean commercial, and I have an inkling they probably hired an agency on that campaign versus in-house. So I think for the right client, for the right budget, it does make sense. But if you're a smaller business, it doesn't always make sense, because what you said was completely true. Like, communication, it's like, why are you spending all this valuable time playing telephone with your team? It's like, when is the actual work getting done? And for a lot of these small businesses, the name of the game is speed. You got to get that offer out there. You got to be testing out different products. You got to be testing out different social media posts. The game is speed. And sometimes with an agency, there's a little bit of a bottleneck. And the other element is time. And I know from a freelancer perspective, you are going to be limited with time. So I think if you are going to go the freelancer route, you only work with a few high level clients that pay you what you're worth. And maybe you're doing some sort of retainer so you can be really efficient between the clients. But when it comes to the agency, you very well know that agency has other clients. And so sometimes, especially if you're a smaller client on their roster, they can deprioritize you. And so then you're just waiting on them to respond back. And, I hate to bring this up, but this is a very real thing. For the profit margin to make sense for an agency, if a client is asking for something outside of the scope, they have to charge for that. And I can't stand that, because sometimes you have to take a step back and figure out what's best for the business here. Sometimes it's better for the business to move faster, to get something up on the website, to get a meta ad out there, but you're restricted by the structure of an agency where it's like, okay, here's a scope change, please sign off on this, please pay it. And it just slows everything down. And it's like, we're not thinking critically about what does the business actually need here in order to be profitable, in order to grow, like what is the best interest of the business versus here's a structure we have to follow so that the agency has a good profit margin.
Yeah, and I do want to go back to the idea of speed when it comes to freelancers versus agencies. This is where freelancers can have a huge advantage if the agency, again, is a high volume, low profit margin agency. Now, if you're trying to run an agency and your whole business model depends on the idea of you having a high volume amount of work, meaning you're running ads, you're blowing out ads everywhere, and then you're getting a huge amount of people coming in. Maybe you're only closing 10% of them, but the whole business model is the idea of having a large amount of clients. Now, for me, I've always promoted the idea of fewer clients, higher profit. Now, a lot of these agencies, it's more clients, lower profit, but the more clients you get, the more profits you end up with at the end of the day. The problem with anything that's high volume is things start to fall through the cracks. And if you've ever hired anyone on Fiverr or you've hired the wrong freelancer on Upwork, you'll know if you look at their jobs in progress page, some of these freelancers have hundreds of jobs in progress. And what that immediately tells me is that this is a hidden agency. This is someone who is subcontracting out the work. Maybe they're telling the client, maybe they're not. But guess what happens when you have 100 jobs in the pipeline? What do you think that does to the level of quality that the client is going to receive from that freelancer hidden agency? It's going to drop. Something eventually, the quality is going to drop, the communication is going to drop, the deliverable timing is going to drop, the speed's going to drop, and things are going to start falling through the cracks. Versus the agency that takes the high value client only approach, the freelancer that really holds out for the right clients and charges a premium price for the right clients, and that freelancer is going to be able to deliver such a higher quality product versus the high volume agency. And so that's where I think a lot of these agency owners, end up collapsing, is because they're trying to do a high volume model versus a low volume, high profit margin model. And there's just so many things that can go wrong when you have too many clients.
Mhm. So, I don't wanna bash on agencies. I have a few very good friends that run agencies, so I'm not trying to bash them. But one advantage to running an agency is you can sell it. There's potential to sell it and to get a buyout or a payout from selling your agency. I actually had someone approach me and ask me, "Hey, I want to buy your agency. I want to buy what you've created." So sometimes you can package up whatever the number of clients, the lifetime value of all of those clients, which can be attractive if that's a direction that you want to go. Versus as a freelancer, you might not have that option available to you.
Yeah, that's 100% true. You can sell an agency if you package it the right way, if it's something that can be sold. Now, I will push back on that, and I will say a lot of these agencies, they don't actually have any intellectual property. They're just sort of a brand, and maybe the owner of the agency is able to bring in work, but the actual team that's executing the work changes every week. People come in, people come out. So if your agency has a lot of turnover and you don't have any sort of solid intellectual property that you can say, here, I've got this amazing group of people that are, super bought into this culture or whatever. So, it can be sold, it can be packaged and sold, but I would say a majority of the agencies that, I come across, I wouldn't even call them an agency. They're just sort of an agency in disguise, and they're just sort of outsourcing to whoever they can. And if a buyer came in and asked them to sort of explain their business and explain the people that they work for them, I think things would fall apart because they don't actually have a real team in place.
That's a valid point. That's a very valid point, and I think that's why if you are gonna go the agency route, go at it 100%. Have employees, have maybe a potential office to show the potential buyer, this is a legit company. These aren't just random freelancers coming in, coming out, and I think that can strengthen your case if you do eventually want to sell your agency, but you kinda gotta go all in. The other thing that you mentioned was interesting is like this idea of a personal brand. And I mean, trust me, I market for companies and it can be difficult to package up and market an agency versus a personal brand. And just in terms of performance, personal brand content tends to do better. It's kind of hard to put a face to a company unless you have like a spokesperson, and then it's like, okay, great, like Jimmy is the spokesperson of this agency, but then again, as you're getting customers come in the door, they're like, I want to work with Jimmy. I don't want to work with Susie. I don't want to be passed off to work with the team. I want to work with Jimmy. So I've always found that delicate dance to be really difficult on like what are you actually putting out there publicly and then what's the customer experience.
Yeah, exactly. And so, what I would encourage a lot of you guys out there who come across advertisements from gurus trying to teach you how to start and scale an agency, think about this. If that person didn't have a huge personal brand or a huge social media following, would the model that they're actually teaching you, would that even work? Because a lot of these gurus, what they're actually not telling you is that the core of their business comes from their personal brand, not the high volume agency that they're trying to promote you. So, a lot of the times it's way more valuable to have a personal brand and then to leverage that into your freelancing work than it would be to start an agency from scratch with no personal brand and try to win work that way. So you got to be careful when these social media people are telling you that a business model will work, because a lot of the times the only reason their model works is because they're big on social media.
Exactly. And then it's like, as an agency, how do you differentiate yourself from other agencies if you don't have like the face of the agency? I've seen agencies do it, so it's definitely possible, but it usually starts from the personal brand of the CEO or the founder, from my experience. The other thing I wanted to mention is this idea of lifestyle. If you are an agency owner and you're going that direction, sometimes it's hard to make like lifestyle decisions. And I don't know about you, but that was a key component in my decision making to decide if I want to do the freelancer thing. It's like I can decide which clients I get to work with, if it's a cool project, if it's a cool account that I can work on and put on my portfolio. I can make that decision to see what's best for me. Versus if you're going the agency route, you have overhead to think about. So when you come and make those decisions, it's not just what's best for you, it's what's best for the team. And that can be really difficult. And let's say it's a Tuesday and you're like, hey, I'm feeling a little burnt out today. Let me take the afternoon off, get my nails done, take myself out to lunch. You can do that as a freelancer. Granted, you're on board with having a small number of high paying clients. So obviously the numbers align, but you have that freedom and that flexibility versus if you're going to go the agency direction, it's just a different decision making that you have to go through. So as a freelancer, you have so much more flexibility when it comes to your lifestyle. And I don't know about you, that was a key consideration for me as I decided, okay, do I want to do this freelancer thing? Do I want to make this work? And it sounded amazing. Like I would have flexibility in my schedule. I could do what I want. And when I'm making a decision to bring on a client, I could just make that decision for myself versus if you're going the agency route, it's kind of like, oof, is this best for the business or is this best for me? And I don't like making decisions with kind of that clouded judgment, but I know for you, lifestyle was also an important consideration as you decided to take the jump from your 9 to 5.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of my biggest crutches, I guess you could call, or key beliefs is all about autonomy and freedom. And that's another benefit of being a freelancer is that you have much more control over your time. All you need is a small handful of good clients to really have a good life as a freelancer versus, when you have an agency and you have people underneath you, you're constantly worried about profit margin. You're constantly worried about having to oversee the work of your minions, and you're constantly worried about, oh, am I paying my subcontractors too much because of the profit margin of this project? Versus as a freelancer, the profit margin is damn near 100% almost every single time. Obviously there's going to be expenses here and there, but you're not really thinking about profit margin as much as a freelancer. You're mainly thinking about your monthly income. And it's just a more simple way of living, in my opinion. And I will say, as a freelancer, you don't have to be a lone wolf. You can, I'm constantly working with other freelancers, depending on what I need. So sometimes I'll have a video project that is much higher scale, higher budget, and higher expectations. And on those projects, I bring in other freelancers and it's great. And when the project's done, we both go our own way. And then, sometimes they bring me on projects. So versus them being a part of my team and having that expectation that I always have to send them work versus having a network of freelancers that you're a part of. It's a much more simple way of doing business, and you can scale up and scale down with zero overhead, depending on the projects that come in.
That's why I love working with freelancers. I love, love, love working with freelancers because they have that mentality. They have autonomy, they have communication. They are self sufficient, which is incredible. Like you just mentioned, okay, cool, there's a project. I don't know how to do this part of it. Let me bring in somebody to help. You don't have to manage them. They already know how to bring their A game, which, from my experience with the whole agency thing, it's like, you have to train the people. You got to train your team. You got to create SOPs. You got to call them out if they're not performing, and all of that people management that comes into view as soon as you decide to go the agency route. But working with freelancers, having a small network of other freelancers that you can pull in, because you know they're going to bring their A game, they're going to make me look good referring them to this client project. Client's happy, you're paid, you've brought someone, you've nurtured someone in your network. It's a win-win all around. And it's funny, I was also going to mention, like, what are the other advantages of an agency? And something came to mind is, like, if you're working with an agency, I don't know, a marketing agency or a web development agency, you very likely have access to other people with expertise in that agency. I worked with, before my 9 to 5, an SEO agency, and they had a person for all these different services. So it was kind of fantastic. So if you had a web development question, you could be connected with somebody in their team, and that comes with a price though. So if you're a client and you're kind of looking at this from a client perspective, you're like, cool, I've hired this agency to create this website for me. Amazing. Well, I have an SEO question. Oftentimes, somebody within that agency will be able to answer your question. But again, what price? Are you going to have to pay for their time at an agency? It does seem like a better route to go is just having a network of other skilled professionals. So yes, when your client comes to you and they're like, hey, I have a Google Ads question, you could just pull on someone in your network and make sure the client's covered when it comes to giving them the right information.
Yeah, I mean, one of my very favorite things about being a freelancer is working with other freelancers on projects, teaming up, scaling down. And you just know if you choose the right people, they're going to give their absolute best because they want you to continue bringing them on. And then obviously the more work that you bring them, the more incentive that they have to hire you. And you scratch my back, I scratch your back. And you don't have any of that awkward, you're beneath me, I'm above you, you know, don't talk to the client in a certain way. You're not sort of white labeling the work. It's just sort of a partnership versus a hierarchy. And that's another benefit. The other thing I wanted to bring up is sort of what I've been noticing, or maybe it's a feeling that I've been noticing. I think people are sick of being handed off to someone else.
I'm over it. I'm completely over it because it feels like a bait and switch. I've worked with business coaches before, and I'll never forget one business coach I worked with. It was just her. And that was the best possible experience for me. She was a referral. I jumped on a call with her. She did this like business blueprint for me, 100% for free. And then boom, we're locked and loaded, and it was her. And I was only interacting with her, and it was the best thing ever because I felt like I was getting what I paid for, and I was getting the value because I had access to her. There was no CSMs involved. There was no whatever extra people. It was just her. And I want us to get back to that place.
Yeah, and I don't want this podcast to be about coaching programs or online courses or whatever, but I think the idea of getting away from things that scale and into things that can't scale is where we're going to all have to go into the future. And one of my mentors, he always talks about this. He says, in the days of AI, things that cannot scale are more valuable than the things that scale, because guess what? If it can scale, AI can eat your lunch. If it can scale, it's going to become a commodity because other people are going to take that same exact model. They're going to copy and paste it, and now it's going to become a race to the bottom. If it can't scale, meaning we only have 24 hours in a day, right? You and I can only talk to so many people in those 24 hours. And that means that it's actually valuable. It cannot scale. We can't scale ourselves beyond a certain point. And I think as we get into 2026, 2027, it's going to be all about things that can't scale that are going to become valuable. And it sounds counterintuitive, but I think you're going to see this become a trend over time. People are tired of being a part of someone's scaling business. People are tired of feeling like they're being sold to and they're being sold a scam. I think as we go into the future, it's going to become all about small, tight-knit communities. Maybe the prices have to go up in order to maintain that level of quality, but it's going to become more about things that can't scale, things that are high value and really sort of boutique in their approach.
It's funny, I had no idea you were gonna say that because in our society, anything that is not scalable is deemed as bad or inefficient. Like all of the content out there is like, scale this system, scale this blueprint, scale, scale, scale. And if you can't scale, it's inefficient. Like you shouldn't even do it. And that's really interesting, especially with AI. Which is good. I mean, that's a great thing to hear. Very counterintuitive to what I was anticipating, but it shines more of a light on freelancing. And if you can offer a premium service, a white glove service to a select number of clients, yes, they pay you accordingly for that and your expertise. That is a viable business model where you can actually have more peace of mind. You can have those really meaningful client relationships, and you don't necessarily have to go the scaling route and create an agency. You can still make a decent amount of money doing that and enjoy it and have a really successful career.
Yeah, I mean, I see this trend happening over time, and it's, we've all been a part of someone's scaling business. We've all felt like we were taken advantage of because we were sold one thing and we got delivered something else. And I think being a freelancer is going to be great because you can provide that human to human, that authentic human to human relationship and level of communication that no agency on earth can really compete with. And so that's how I see things. I'm sure other people have other opinions on that. But I think as we go into the future and as AI starts automating all these things that can scale, it's going to become more and more important to have human level businesses and less automating, less scaling going on. So, I mean, that's kind of our rambling thoughts. We might have got a little sidetracked when it comes to AI and all these other things, but we've seen both sides. Jessica ran an agency for a while and then transitioned back into being a freelancer. I think there's obviously pros and cons to both approaches. And I think, if you are, the agency model is the sexy thing and the freelancer a lot of the times is the less sexy option, or at least that's how it's portrayed online. But I will say, as we go into the future and as AI makes people more and more jaded about talking to a machine versus talking to a human, interfacing with an actual human being, interfacing with a computer, I think you're going to be able to survive as a freelancer if you can provide that high level white glove experience, that super beautiful experience for clients. And I don't think you need to worry about AI destroying you as long as you can provide that beautiful high level communication service with clients. And like I said, focus on things that can't actually scale, like your personality. You can't really scale your personality or your client experience. That's something that cannot be scaled or replicated. So lean into those things and you should be fine.
So this is a little bit of a humble brag, but I promise there's a point to this. Just the other day, I had a client say, "We could not have done this project without you, Jessica." And that made my week. That to me is why freelancing is worth it. To be able to provide that high touch, white glove service. And it just means so much to me and it fulfills me to my core to be able to be so invaluable to a team. And again, like Just a nugget of wisdom, especially if you're a freelancer and you're getting going on your journey, like, you can get to the point where you are just completely invaluable, being 2 steps ahead, providing that human touch, and being able to just be a high value, amazing freelancer.
And speaking of freelancing, our school community will be going live soon. And I promise this is not something that we actually want to scale. We want a very tight knit community. We don't want hundreds of people in there. We want this to be a small core group of people that are all extremely high level and that all are super ambitious and want to be high level freelancers. And the vibe of the community is super important to us. So this is not something we want to scale. We're not going to be bringing in client success managers. It's going to be me and Jessica and our core group of high level freelancers. If that's something that's interesting to you, go ahead and email me before we go live, and I will get you added to our pre-launch group. And that is going to have a huge discount attached to it. So if you're interested in that, send me an email. Otherwise, let me know what you guys think in the comments if you have any questions or topic ideas, and we'll see you in the next one. Happy freelancing.